The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched nearly a mile in every direction. Its walls curved upward like the interior of an egg, covered in floating platforms where representatives of thousands of species sat, observed, and judged. Light emanated from everywhere and nowhere, adjusting to the visual needs of beings who saw in ultraviolet, infrared, or spectra that had no human name. Ambassador Elina Vasquez stood on the central podium, a tiny figure in the vastness of the hall. She was 53 years old. Gray hairs streaked her black hair, and the lines around her eyes spoke of difficult decisions made in difficult times. She wore a simple blue uniform of the Earth Diplomatic Corps, unadorned except for a small pin depicting Earth rising over the lunar horizon. Around her, representatives of 4,000 spacefaring civilizations waited. Some were humanoid. Most were not. There were beings of crystal and beings of gas. There were creatures with too many eyes and creatures with no eyes at all. There were hive minds speaking through biological puppets and ancient artificial intelligences encased in bodies of living metal. They all looked at the human with expressions ranging from boredom to contempt. The representative of the Velari sat in a place of honor near the front. His species resembled mantises grown to over 2 meters in height, with an iridescent green carapace and blade-like arms capable of cutting steel. His compound eyes reflected Elina's image 1,000 times, and his mandibles clicked, emitting a sound that his translator interpreted as a quiet, mocking laugh. "The representative of Earth may speak," announced the council chairman, a being of pure energy contained in a magnetic bottle. Elina took a breath. In her 30 years of service, she had delivered hundreds of speeches in this hall. This could be the most important. "Respected representatives," she began, her voice calm and measured. 3 standard weeks ago, the freighter Meridian's Hope was following a neutral path through a standard supply route to our colony on New Helsinki. On board the vessel were 800 crew members, 1,200 passengers, including 400 children, and enough supplies to support the colony during its winter season. She paused, allowing the figures to sink in. The Meridian's Hope was destroyed by fire from a Velari patrol squadron. There were no survivors. The Velari Dominion claimed it was an accident, a case of mistaken identity. They expressed their regrets and offered a small financial compensation. The Velari representative's mandibles clicked again. "The matter is settled," he said. His translated voice sounded dismissive. "Accidents happen in space. Your vessel was in a region where our forces were conducting military exercises. It should not have been there." "The Meridian's Hope was traveling through neutral space," Elina repeated. "Space that belongs to no one. Space where your forces had no legal right to conduct military exercises. And this is not the first such incident." She gestured, and holographic displays appeared around her, showing data that every representative had already seen. In the last 10 years, there have been 47 incidents involving Velari forces and human vessels. 32 of them resulted in loss of life. The total death toll exceeds 1,200. The Velari Dominion claimed accident or mistaken identity in every single case because these were accidents. The Velari representative said, "Humans, you are newcomers to space. Your ships resemble those of several species with whom we are currently in conflict. If your people insist on traveling through dangerous regions, some losses are inevitable." Elina looked at him for a long time. Her expression did not change. "This body exists to maintain peace in the galaxy," she said, turning to the wide assembly. "We joined the Confederation 200 years ago because we believed in this mission. We followed every rule, we paid every tax, we contributed to every peacekeeping operation, we did everything required of us." She turned back to the Velari representative. "And in return, we have watched our people die again and again. We filed complaints and were ignored. We asked for investigations and were denied. We asked for justice and received only excuses." The Velari's compound eyes glittered. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "that is because this body recognizes the natural order of things. Some species are strong, some species are weak. The strong do not answer to the weak. That is how it has always been in the galaxy." A murmur of agreement swept through sections of the hall. Not every species agreed with the Velari, but many did. The galaxy was not a kind place, and those who had fought their way to power saw no reason to show kindness to those who had not. Elina nodded slowly, as if she had expected this answer. "I understand," she said. "Then let me clearly state humanity's position." She straightened her shoulders, and something in her posture changed. The diplomatic softness vanished, replaced by something harder, something more ancient. "We do not want war," she said. "We never wanted war. Everything humanity has done since joining this confederation has been aimed at preventing conflict. We kept our fleet small. We kept our weaponry limited. We kept our colonies few and far from the territories of aggressive species." She paused. "We did this not because we are weak. We did this because we choose to be restrained." The Velari representative let out a sound his translator interpreted as a caustic laugh. "Restraint. You call this restraint. We call it inability. Your species has 47 colonies. The Dominion has 470. Your fleet numbers perhaps 300 ships. Ours has 3 million. You speak of choice, but we see only a species that has reached the limits of its capabilities. You see only what we allowed you to see," Elina said quietly. For a moment, something flickered in the Velari's compound eyes. Not yet fear, but perhaps a distant precursor of uncertainty. "We ask for the last time," Elina continued. "Stop these provocations. Stop killing our people. Allow us to exist in peace." "This is not a demand," she clarified. "It is a request, a polite request from a species that still hopes for a peaceful resolution." "And if we refuse?" the Velari asked. "What then, little human? Will you file another complaint? Write another letter? Your restraint, as you call it, from my perspective, looks very much like helplessness." Elina looked at him for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was soft, almost gentle. "If you refuse," she said, "then we will cease to be restrained, and you will learn why we chose restraint in the first place." The hall erupted in laughter. Thousands of species mocked the tiny human who dared to threaten one of the great powers of the galaxy. The Velari representative's mandibles clicked in rhythmic amusement, and even some of the more neutral species joined in the mockery. Elina waited for the laughter to subside. Her expression never changed. "This is not a threat," she said when the hall was quiet again. "Humanity does not make threats. This is a warning, a courtesy extended to this body and the Velari Dominion in particular. We are saying clearly and openly to you that we have been holding back. We are saying clearly and openly, do not force us to stop holding back." "Your warning has been noted," the Velari representative said. His voice dripped with contempt and dismissal. "The Dominion does not take orders from victim species. If you want to survive in this galaxy, you will learn to accept your place in it." Elina gathered her materials. The speech was over. She had said what she came to say. "Very well," she said. "Let it be entered into the record that humanity warned the Galactic Council. Let it be entered into the record that our warning was ignored. Whatever happens next, remember that we tried. We tried very hard to avoid this." She walked off the podium and headed for the exit. The laughter followed her, echoing through the vast hall. In the observation gallery above, a being watched the human ambassador leave. Ketorin was a Mandari, a species known throughout the galaxy for its ability to see patterns that others missed. His body was humanoid but covered in skin that shifted colors based on his emotions. Currently, it was a troubling grayish blue. He had been studying humanity for 60 standard years. He had read every report, analyzed every data point, built models, simulations, and projections. And something in the human ambassador's speech deeply unsettled him. It wasn't the words themselves. The galaxy was full of weak species making empty threats. What troubled Ketorin was the complete absence of fear in the human's eyes. He had seen species threaten the Velari before. They always showed fear, even when they tried to hide it. Elevated pulse, micro-expressions of terror, the subtle signs of a creature who knew they were bluffing. Elina Vasquez had shown none of those signs. She spoke with the calm confidence of someone stating a simple fact. "The sky is blue, water is wet. If you push us, you will regret it." Ketorin's pattern recognition skills were screaming at him that something was wrong, very, very wrong. He opened his files on humanity and began to review them again. The data was strange. It had always been strange, but he had attributed that strangeness to humanity being a young species, still finding its place. Now, he looked at them with new eyes. Human industrial production had remained constant for 200 years. This should have been impossible. Every species experienced growth curves, rapid expansion followed by gradual leveling off. Humans simply stayed at the same level, no growth at all. Human energy consumption told a similar story. Their population had grown tenfold since joining the Confederation, but their energy consumption had barely increased. Either humans were the most efficient species in galactic history, or they were hiding a massive amount of energy production. Human technology was perhaps the strangest data point of all. When they joined the Confederation, their weapons, shields, and engines were roughly comparable to the galactic average. 2 centuries later, they were still roughly comparable to the galactic average. No progress at all. Every other species improved over time, new discoveries, new innovations, new weapons, tools, and methods. It was the nature of intelligent life to progress. Only humans seemed frozen in place. Kitterin had always assumed that meant humans had reached their technological ceiling. Some species were just limited. It happened. But now, watching Elina Vasquez walk out of the hall with that calm confidence in her eyes, he wondered, what if he had interpreted the data incorrectly? What if humans hadn't stopped developing? What if they simply stopped showing their achievements? He began running new simulations, entering different assumptions. What if human industrial production was actually 10 times higher than reported? What if their energy production was 100 times higher? What if their technology had been evolving this whole time, hidden behind a facade of stagnation? The results made his color-changing skin turn pale. If his new assumptions were correct and they were speculative, he reminded himself, only speculative, then humanity was not a minor power pretending to be even weaker. Humanity was a major power pretending to be a minor one, perhaps a great power, perhaps something beyond greatness. Kittorin saved his simulations and requested an urgent meeting with the Security Council of the Confederation. He knew he would likely be ignored. The Mandari were respected for their pattern recognition abilities but often dismissed as paranoid. They saw threats everywhere, even where there were none. But this time, Kitterin was certain he was right. Humans were hiding something huge. He only hoped the galaxy would listen before it was too late. 3 days later, the Velari Dominion announced a campaign to pacify the human frontier worlds. Their stated goal was to stabilize the region and protect Dominion interests from human aggression. The fleet they assembled was the largest in Dominion history. 800 warships, including 12 planet crackers and the flagship, the Pride of the Dominion, a ship so massive it had its own internal weather systems. Admiral Kritson commanded the fleet from the bridge of the Pride of the Dominion. He was old for a Velari. His carapace had faded to a dull green, but his mind was sharp, and his reputation was formidable. He had commanded the conquest of 17 species. Humans would be the 18th. As his fleet prepared to enter hyperspace, the last message arrived from Earth. It was short, only 3 words. Please reconsider. Final warning. Admiral Kritson read the message and deleted it. Then he gave the order to jump. The fleet vanished into hyperspace, heading for the human colonial world of New Helsinki. Behind them, in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council, the recording of Elina Vasquez's warning collected digital dust. No one thought to reconsider it. No one thought it mattered. They would learn otherwise very soon. Kittorin hadn't slept in 4 days. His species didn't require much sleep, but even by Mandari standards, this was dangerous. His color-changing skin had turned a sickly gray, and his colleagues in the Confederation's intelligence division had begun leaving food packets on his desk in silent concern. He barely noticed. His whole world had narrowed to the streams of data flowing across his screens, to the patterns that no one else seemed to see, and to the growing certainty that something terrible was about to happen. The Security Council had rejected his concerns. The meeting lasted less than 15 minutes. Council members politely listened to his presentation, watched his simulations, and then, with varying degrees of patience, explained why he was wrong. Humans are a known factor, the Velari representative on the council said. Our intelligence services have watched them for 2 centuries. We know their fleet strength, their industrial potential, their population, their technology. There are no surprises. Your intelligence sees what it wants to see, Kitterin replied. And your pattern recognition sees threats that do not exist, the chairman responded. This is a known limitation of the Mandarian cognitive structure. You excel at finding patterns, but you also find patterns where there are none. The meeting ended there. Kitterin returned to his station and continued his research, knowing he was right and knowing no one would believe him until it was too late. Now, 4 days later, he had gathered more evidence. Much more. The first part was historical. Kitterin delved into the archives, researching the period before humanity joined the Confederation. The records were sparse. Humanity had been an insignificant pre-contact civilization, barely worth monitoring, but what existed was troubling. 50 years before first contact, human radio signals were detected. That was normal. Most species developed radio communication before achieving faster-than-light travel. But the content of those signals was strange. They were full of war. Kitterin listened to transmissions describing conflicts that killed tens of millions. He saw images of cities turned to ruins, weapons that could level entire regions in a single blinding flash. He read reports of systematic extermination, of ideological conflicts fought with fanatical intensity, a species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times. Then suddenly the signals changed. Approximately 20 years before first contact, violence in human transmissions dropped sharply. Weapons disappeared, wars ended. A species that had been tearing itself apart throughout its history suddenly became peaceful almost overnight. This was not normal. Species did not change that quickly. It took generations, sometimes centuries, for warlike civilizations to become peaceful. Humans did it in less than 2 decades. Kitterin's pattern recognition screamed that this was wrong. Species didn't just stop being violent, they redirected their violence. They found new enemies, they built new weapons. What had humans been doing for the last 220 years? The second piece of evidence came from economic analysis. Kitterin gained access to all trade records, every shipping manifest, every financial transaction involving human entities. The data went back to the earliest days of their Confederation membership. The numbers didn't add up. Humans imported massive amounts of raw materials, metals, rare elements, radioactive isotopes. That was normal for a growing civilization. But when Kitterin compared the imports to visible human industry, the math failed. They imported much more than they could use. Where was it all going? He found similar discrepancies in their energy sector. Humans were buying equipment for energy production, fusion reactors, solar collectors, antimatter containment systems, much more than their colonies and fleets could possibly need. Where was the excess energy being used? He even found a discrepancy in their population data. Human birth rates suggested their population should be nearly triple what official records showed. Either humans were dying at an unprecedented rate, which would undoubtedly have been noticed, or millions of them were living somewhere that appeared on no official map. Where were the missing people? The third piece of evidence was the strangest of all. Kitterin compiled a database of every human he could identify working in technical fields, scientists, engineers, researchers. He tracked their careers, their publications, their contributions to galactic knowledge. The results were bizarre. Human scientists published constantly in the early years after contact. They made significant contributions to several fields, including FTL physics and quantum computing. Then, about 150 years ago, publications mostly stopped. Oh, humans still published, but Kitterin's analysis showed that recent publications were shallow, derivative works that added nothing significant to any field. It was as if the entire human scientific community had decided to stop real research and start producing meaningless papers. Why would a species want to appear less intelligent than they were? Kitterin knew the answer. He just couldn't prove it. Humans were hiding. They were hiding their industry, their energy, their population, and their science. They were presenting a carefully constructed facade to the galaxy, building something else behind it. But what and why? He opened his simulations again. By now, he had run hundreds of them, each with different assumptions about what humans might be hiding. The results varied wildly, but they all pointed in one direction. Humans were not weak. Humans were perhaps the strongest species in the galaxy, and they had been pretending otherwise for 200 years. Why would they do that? Kitterin recalled the human transmissions he had listened to: wars, weapons, systematic destruction, near-extinction events. Humans knew what they were capable of. They looked at their own history and were horrified by what they saw. They reached the stars carrying the memory of every atrocity committed by their species, and they decided, consciously and intentionally, never to show the galaxy that side of themselves. They were pretending to be weak not because they wanted to deceive. They were pretending to be weak because they were afraid of what would happen if they were strong. This should have been comforting. A species that chose restraint was a species one could negotiate with. But Kitterin felt no comfort, because the Velari were about to force the humans to stop being restrained. He checked the tactical displays. The Velari fleet was still in hyperspace and was due to arrive at New Helsinki in about 6 hours. 800 warships against one human colonial world. Kitterin had tried to warn them. He sent messages to Admiral Kritzen, to the Velari High Command. To anyone who would listen, his messages were ignored or returned with dismissive replies. He even tried to contact the humans directly. The human embassy thanked him for his concern and politely declined to comment on his analysis. Ambassador Vasquez sent a personal reply consisting of only 3 sentences. "Thank you for your concern, Analyst Kitterin. Your pattern recognition skills are impressive. We hope you will be just as insightful in analyzing what happens next." That message scared him more than anything else. Humans knew what was coming. They had known all along, and they were not afraid. Kitterin made a decision. He couldn't stop what was about to happen, but he could document it. He could create a record from which others could learn. He began recording everything: tactical displays, communication channels, sensor data from all monitoring stations near New Helsinki. He would capture every moment of what was about to happen. And when it was over, he would ensure the galaxy understood what it meant. The hours ticked by slowly. Kitorin watched the progress of the Velari fleet through hyperspace, a swarm of bright dots moving inexorably toward their target. He watched the defensive preparations of the human colony, such as they were: a handful of orbital platforms, a small garrison of ground troops, perhaps 20 defensive ships, all old and weakly armed. By any reasonable analysis, New Helsinki should fall within hours. The Velari would establish orbital superiority, bombard any opposition into total submission, and land their ground forces to complete the occupation. It was a standard military operation the Dominion had performed countless times. And yet, Kitterin's pattern recognition skills would not stop screaming. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. He opened the sensor data from New Helsinki and studied it more closely. The orbital platforms displayed standard human technology. Nothing remarkable. The defensive ships were exactly what they seemed: old vessels that would be lucky to survive the first exchange of fire. But there was something else, a faint energy signature that his instruments barely caught. It was coming from somewhere beneath the planet's surface, and it was getting stronger. He tried to amplify the reading, but the signal was too faint and too strange. It didn't match any known energy signature in the galactic database. It was simply wrong. It was like looking at a color that didn't exist. Kitterin made a note in his record: abnormal energy readings from New Helsinki. Origin and nature unknown. Intensity increasing. He checked the time. The Velari fleet would exit hyperspace in 30 minutes. He thought of all the species that had underestimated the Velari powers that believed their defense packs would protect them, empires that trusted in their superior numbers, countless others who learned too late that the Dominion did not negotiate, did not compromise, did not show mercy. Now, the Velari were about to learn the same lesson themselves. Kitorin was certain of that. He wasn't sure what form that lesson would take. His simulation suggested possibilities that ranged from impressive to terrifying. Some showed humans winning a conventional military victory thanks to superior technology. Some showed them using weapons that didn't officially exist. Some showed results so extreme that his pattern recognition flagged them as statistically improbable, but not impossible. He hoped reality would be closer to the first option. A conventional defeat might humble the Velari without destabilizing the entire galactic order. A limited demonstration of hidden human capabilities might even be healthy, forcing the Confederation to treat humanity with more respect without fundamentally shifting the power balance. But something in his gut told him it wouldn't be that simple. Humans had been hiding for 200 years. They had watched the galaxy and studied its customs. They saw how the strong treated the weak, how empires rose and fell, how species showing mercy were exploited, and species showing strength were feared. If they were finally going to reveal themselves, they would do it in a way that left no doubts, no half-measures, no limited demonstrations that could be explained away or ignored. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity had become over 2 centuries of secret development, and Kitterin suspected that this lesson would change everything. The countdown timer hit 0. Across the galaxy, sensor stations detected the Velari fleet exiting hyperspace above New Helsinki. 800 warships. Their weapons were already charged, their targeting systems already aimed at the planet below. Kitorin leaned forward in his chair. His skin changed shades of alarm and anticipation. The record would show what happened next. He would ensure of it. On the bridge of the Pride of the Dominion, Admiral Critson surveyed the tactical display with satisfaction. The human defensive installations were exactly as intelligence predicted pitiful. A handful of orbital platforms, a few obsolete ships, nothing that could resist his fleet for more than a few minutes. "Report status," he ordered. "All ships in formation, Admiral. Weapons charged. Targeting solutions confirmed. The colony's population is approximately 2 million. Shall I order a preliminary bombardment?" Critson considered. Standard doctrine was to destroy the orbital defenses first, then demand surrender. then begin systematic bombardment if surrender was refused. It was effective. It minimized Dominion losses while maximizing the psychological impact on the enemy. But the humans annoyed him. The speech their ambassador gave in the Confederation Hall, that calm confidence in her eyes, the implied threats she had no right to back up. He wanted to send a message not just to this colony, but to all of humanity. No preliminary bombardment, he said. Target the colony's largest city directly. I want the humans to see what happens to those who threaten the Dominion. His officers exchanged glances. This was not standard procedure. Targeting civilian centers before military objectives was wasteful and unnecessarily cruel, but no one argued. Admiral Critzen's reputation did not include tolerance for subordinates questioning his orders. Target: New Helsinki, Admiral. Population approximately 800,000. Weapons ready on your command. Kritzen watched the target display. The city was a sprawling mass of buildings and infrastructure, the largest human settlement on this world. In a few moments, it would be a crater. Fire, he said. The weapons of 800 warships unleashed their fury. Plasma charges, antimatter missiles, a torrent of destruction racing toward the planet below. Enough firepower to crack the planetary crust if focused on a single point. The first shots reached the atmosphere and stopped. Kritzen stared at his display, not understanding what he was seeing. The weapons had simply stopped. They hung in the air above the colony, frozen in place, their energy harmlessly dissipating in the atmosphere. Report? He barked. What happened? Unknown, Admiral. Our weapons appear to have been neutralized by some defensive field. We are detecting no familiar shielding technology. It's as if the attacks simply ceased to exist. Kritzen felt the first faint stirring of unease. This was not in the intelligence reports. Humans shouldn't have technology capable of stopping a full fleet salvo. Increase power. Fire again. The fleet fired again, and again, and again. Each time, the result was the same. The weapons reached a certain point in space and simply stopped working. No explosion, no impact, just cessation. Admiral, we are detecting an energy source on the surface of the planet. It is massive, far larger than anything we have seen from human technology, and it is growing. Kritzen looked at the sensor display. What he saw made his compound eyes widen. The energy signature was immense and growing by the second. It was coming from beneath the colony, rising from the earth like something awakening from a very long sleep. And it was not alone. Throughout the space surrounding New Helsinki, new signals were appearing. Ships were materializing out of nowhere, emerging from shelters that shouldn't have existed. They looked like no human ship in the Velari databases. They were sleek, dark, and irregular. Their hulls seemed to absorb light. They reflected it. There were only 12. Admiral Kritzen looked at the 12 ships and felt something he hadn't felt in 50 years of military service. Fear. Admiral, said his sensor officer, his voice trembling. These ships, they aren't using any systems we know of. They don't even follow standard physics. They just move however they want. The 12 ships took positions around the Velari fleet. They were tiny compared to the Dominion warships. Each was no larger than a light cruiser. Against 800 vessels, including 12 planet crackers, they should have been insignificant. They didn't seem insignificant. A transmission came through. Audio only. A human voice, calm and professional. This is the United Earth Defense Initiative. You are ordered to immediately cease hostilities and depart this system. You have 60 seconds to comply. This is your only warning. Kritzen found his voice. This is Admiral Kritzen of the Velari Dominion. You are outnumbered 800 to 12. Surrender or be destroyed. There was a pause. When the voice returned, it sounded almost sad. The 60 seconds were a courtesy. Admiral, we hoped you would make a different choice. Time is up, and the lesson has begun. Admiral Kritzen had 4 seconds to give an order before the universe stopped making sense. All ships, target those vessels and fire at... He never finished the sentence. The 12 human ships shifted. It was the only word that fit, though it didn't come close to describing what actually happened. They didn't accelerate. They didn't turn. They simply occupied one position in space, and then occupied another with no visible transition between the two states. One moment they were in loose formation around the Velari fleet. The next moment, they were everywhere, weaving between the Dominion warships like predators circling prey, moving along trajectories that had no tactical sense because they didn't need to have tactical sense. Velari gunners tried to track them. They couldn't. The human ships were never where the targeting computers predicted they would be. They moved backward, they moved sideways, they moved in directions that shouldn't have existed. "Admiral, we cannot get a target lock. They aren't following any known physics." Kritzen watched his tactical display fill with error messages. His fleet's weapons were firing erratically, hitting only empty space. The human ships danced through the chaos, untouched, unhurried, as if they had all the time in the world. Then they began their work. The first Velari warship was the cruiser Dominion's Claw. It was a veteran vessel with an outstanding combat record, its crew consisting of 3,000 of the Dominion's finest warriors. A human ship flew past it, not attacking, just flying by. And the Dominion's Claw fell apart. It didn't explode, it didn't break, it simply disassembled. Kritzen watched in frozen horror as the cruiser's hull separated into component sections. Weapons disconnected from their mounts. Engine nacelles floated freely. Armor peeled away in perfect sheets. The ship was being taken apart with surgical precision. The crew was escaping in their life pods, automatically ejected by safety systems that the humans somehow hadn't disabled. 3,000 Velari warriors drifted in space among the wreckage of their ship, completely unharmed. The Dominion's Claw hadn't been destroyed. It had been dismantled like a child's toy, and its crew had been neatly removed before the process began. The same thing was happening to the entire fleet. Ship after ship was systematically dismantled. Human vessels moved through the formation like ghosts, touching each Velari warship briefly before moving on. And everywhere they touched, ships simply ceased to be ships. Hulls separated into plates, weapons fell apart into components, engines dissolved into constituent parts. Everything that made a warship was undone, reduced to neatly stacked piles of raw materials floating in the void. And not a single Velari died. "Admiral, they aren't destroying us, they're disassembling us." Kritzen found his voice. "How? What weapon does this?" "Unknown, Admiral. We detect no energy discharges, no projectiles, no radiation. They just touch our ships, and our ships stop being ships. It was impossible. It violated every principle of warfare Kritzen had ever learned. You don't disassemble an enemy fleet carefully. You don't neatly eject their crews before dismantling their ships. You destroy, you kill, you demonstrate your superiority by the only criteria that matters, the number of dead enemies. The humans weren't demonstrating superiority. They were demonstrating something much worse. They were demonstrating control, complete, absolute, almost contemptuous control. They weren't fighting the Velari fleet. They were processing it with the same casual efficiency a factory might process raw materials. The greatest armada of the Dominion was turning into scrap metal, and the humans weren't even trying. Kritzen looked at the timer on his display. Less than 3 minutes had passed since the start of the engagement. 3 minutes. That was all it took for 12 tiny ships to neutralize 800 warships. "Admiral, we need to retreat. We need to warn the Dominion." Retreat. Kritzen had never retreated in his life. The word wasn't in his lexicon, but he looked at what was happening to his fleet, looked at the 12 ships moving like nightmares through the chaos, and he realized this wasn't a battle. This was a lesson. "All ships, emergency jump to hyperspace. Get us out of here." The surviving ships attempted to carry out the order. Engines ignited. Hyperspace coordinates were calculated. Jump points began to form. The human ships didn't stop them. They simply watched as the Velari vessels prepared to flee. They watched and waited, making no move to prevent the retreat. That, for some reason, was scarier than if they had tried to stop the flight. The jump points opened. The surviving ships, perhaps 200 of the original 800, accelerated toward salvation. And then, over the comms channel, came a voice. The same human voice as before, still calm, still professional, but now with a hint of something that might have been sadness. "Admiral Kritzen, a moment before you go." Kritzen's hand froze over the jump command. "Your ships are free. Your crews are unharmed. What we did today, we did with the minimum necessary force. Not a single Velari has died. Not a single Velari will die if you do not force us into further escalation." The voice paused. "We could have killed you all. We could have destroyed your fleet in the first second of the engagement. We have weapons that would have horrified you, Admiral. Weapons that make what you just saw look like gentle persuasion. We chose not to use them." Another pause. "Deliver this message to your Dominion. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that humanity does not want war. We never wanted war. Everything we have done, everything we are capable of, was built in the hope that we would never have to use it. But we will use it if we have to. This was a lesson, Admiral, the first lesson. Please, for the sake of both our species, do not make us teach you a second one." The transmission ended. Critson sat in silence for a long time, staring at the tactical display. His fleet was in ruins. Hundreds of ships reduced to neatly stacked piles of components. Tens of thousands of life pods floated in space. Their passengers were alive and unharmed. He thought about what the human had said. Not a single Velari has died. In 50 years of military service, Critson had never seen a battle where no one died. He didn't believe it was possible. War meant death. That was a fundamental truth every warrior understood. The humans had just demonstrated that they operated by different rules. "Admiral, jump complete." Critson looked at the 12 human ships, still holding their positions around the field of wreckage. They weren't trying to pursue, they were just waiting, watching. "Yes," he said finally. "Jump now." The pride of the Dominion and its surviving escorts vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind the ruins of the greatest fleet the Velari had ever assembled. On the surface of New Helsinki, 2 million colonists emerged from their shelters and looked at the sky. They had felt nothing during the battle. No tremors, no explosions, no sign that a fleet of 800 warships had just tried to destroy their city. They saw the field of wreckage forming a ring around their planet. They saw life pods drifting toward pre-designated collection points. They saw the 12 ships, the ships that had saved them, beginning to vanish into the dimension from which they had appeared. And they understood, perhaps for the first time, what their species had become. Across the galaxy, other species were beginning to understand as well. Kitorin recorded everything. Every sensor reading, every comms intercept, every fragment of data his instruments could capture. Now he sat in his office. His skin was shifting through patterns of shock and awe, trying to comprehend what he had witnessed. The battle had lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. In that time, humanity had dismantled 800 warships, saved every member of their crew, and sent the survivors home with a message of peace. It was simultaneously the most violent and the most merciful military action in recorded galactic history. Kitorin began his analysis, knowing this report would be the most important document he had ever created. The technology the humans demonstrated was beyond anything in the galactic database. The movement of their ships suggested mastery over spatial dimensions that other species could barely theorize. Their ability to dismantle enemy vessels implied control over matter at the molecular level. Their defensive shields stopped a full fleet bombardment without apparent effort. Any one of these capabilities would have made humanity a major power. Together, they suggested something much greater. But it wasn't the technology that truly frightened Kitorin. It was the restraint. Humans had demonstrated a power that could have erased the Velari fleet in seconds. Instead, they chose to dismantle the fleet piece by piece, carefully preserving every life. They gave warnings. They offered chances to surrender. They did everything possible to avoid killing. This wasn't normal behavior. Every other advanced species in galactic history had used their strength to dominate, to conquer, to destroy those who threatened them. Humans followed a completely different pattern. Kitorin recalled the old human transmissions he had studied. Wars, atrocities, weapons of mass destruction, a species that had nearly destroyed itself with its own violence. Humans remembered what they were capable of. They created this overwhelming military power not to use it, but to ensure that they would never have to use it the way they had used it against themselves. They created a power so dominant that any conflict would end before it began, so absolute that victory could be achieved without death. They weren't conquerors, they were something much stranger. They were guardians, self-proclaimed protectors of a galaxy that didn't know it was being protected. Observers who had hidden in plain sight for 2 centuries, waiting and hoping that their power would never be needed. Now, that power was revealed, and the galaxy would never be the same. Kitorin finished his preliminary report and began distributing it to every intelligence agency and government that was willing to receive it. He knew the reactions would vary. Some would demand war, some would demand submission, some would demand answers, but he also knew that none of those reactions would matter. Humans had revealed themselves. They had demonstrated capabilities that made the military forces of the rest of the galaxy look like children's toys. And they had done it while clearly stating they did not want to use those capabilities for conquest. The power balance had shifted dramatically, not through war, not through conquest, but through a single demonstration of overwhelming force combined with unprecedented mercy. Kitorin wondered what would happen next. He wondered, how will the Confederation react? What will the Velari do? Will they accept their humiliation or try to escalate the conflict? But most of all, he thought about the humans themselves. What else were they hiding? If this is what they were willing to show, what were they keeping secret, and what would it take to make them reveal the rest? He remembered Ambassador Vasquez's warning in the Confederation Hall. "We have been holding back. We ask you not to force us to stop holding back." They had stopped holding back just a little bit. Kitoran's pattern recognition skills told him that what he had seen was not humanity's full capability. It wasn't even close. Humans had shown just enough power to end an immediate threat and send a message to the galaxy. They were still holding back. That thought kept him awake for many nights afterward. On Earth, in a command center that officially did not exist, Admiral James Unqua was reviewing the after-action reports from New Helsinki. "The operation went exactly to plan," he said. "Zero casualties on both sides. A clear demonstration of capabilities. Message delivered." Ambassador Vasquez sat across from him, reading the same reports. "Now the galaxy knows," she said quietly. "There is no going back." "No," Unqua agreed. "No. The question is, what will they do with this knowledge? The Velari will want revenge. Pride demands it. Pride will have to adjust to reality. We taught them a lesson in humility. If they need a second lesson, we can provide it." Vasquez looked at him with some concern. "James, we spent 2 centuries trying to avoid this moment. Now that it has come, we need to be careful. We showed them power. Now we need to show them why they should trust that power." Unqua nodded slowly. "The Confederation will demand answers. They will want to know everything. Our capabilities, our intentions, our history. What will we tell them?" "The truth," Vasquez said, "or as much of it as they can handle. We will tell them why we hid. We will tell them what we were afraid of, and we will tell them what we want, which is exactly what we have always wanted. Peace, coexistence, a galaxy where species don't have to be afraid of each other. They won't believe us. No, not at first. But we have time now. We bought ourselves time with this demonstration. Time to prove that we mean what we say." Unqua looked out the window at Earth below. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. A world that produced a species of contradictions, capable of terrifying destruction and remarkable compassion, often simultaneously. 200 years, he said. "We spent 200 years preparing for this moment, hoping it would never come. And now that it has, I wonder, did we make the right choice? To reveal ourselves? We could have remained hidden. We could have let the Velari take New Helsinki, sacrificed 2 million lives to keep our cover. Some in the council argued for it." Vasquez shook her head. "We never could have made that choice, not really. We are human. We don't sacrifice our own to maintain a strategic advantage. It is the one thing we could never do, even when it would have been more rational. It is a weakness. It is what makes us human. It is the very reason we built all of this in the first place. We wanted to have the power to protect everyone, not just ourselves. If we couldn't do that, if we watched our people die to remain hidden, we would have become something worse than what we were trying to prevent." Unqua paused, then nodded. "You're right, as always. So, we move forward. We will stand before the Confederation. We will answer their questions and hope the galaxy is ready to accept what we have become. And if they aren't?" Unqua smiled. But there was no humor in that smile. "Then we will teach them to be ready, one lesson at a time." The emergency session of the Galactic Council became the largest gathering in the organization's history. Every species that could send a representative did so. The Great Hall was overcrowded. Observers watched from screens throughout the complex. They had all come to hear humanity's explanation. Ambassador Elina Vasquez stood on the central podium, just as she had 3 months ago when she delivered her warning. But this time, she was not alone. Behind her stood Admiral James Unqua in a uniform that bore no insignia of any organization the galaxy had ever heard of. And behind him stood a row of people in similar uniforms. Their faces were calm and composed. The hall was silent. No laughter this time. No mockery. Just thousands of species watching and waiting to learn what humanity had been hiding for 2 centuries. The chairman opened the session. "The representative of Earth may address the assembly. The Confederation demands a full report on the events at New Helsinki and an explanation of the capabilities demonstrated there." Elina stepped forward. "Respected representatives," she began. 3 months ago, I stood in this hall and warned you that humanity was holding back. I was met with laughter. The Velari representative called us a victim species. He said the strong do not answer to the weak." She paused, letting the memory settle. The Velari have since learned that we are not weak. They learned this lesson at New Helsinki, where their fleet of 800 warships was dismantled in 4 minutes. They learned this without losing a single life because we chose to teach them gently. A murmur ran through the hall. Today, you demanded answers. You want to know what humanity has been hiding. You want to know how we develop technology exceeding everything in the galactic database. You want to know our intentions. Do we plan to use our power the way others have used theirs? She gestured to the space beside her, and holographic displays shimmered, coming to life. I will tell you everything, but first, I must tell you a story. It is a story about who we are and how we became who we are. The displays showed images of human history, cities, technology, people going about their daily lives. It looked peaceful, normal. This is Earth in 2012, by our calendar, about 50 years before our first contact with the galaxy. At this time, humanity reached a comfortable level of technological development. We had fusion energy, advanced computing, early artificial intelligence. We were starting to reach for the stars. The images changed, and humanity was recovering after nearly destroying itself. The new images were darker, ruined cities, mushroom clouds, mass graves, products of a long history of human violence, shown without comment or justification. These are not ancient events, Elina continued. They occurred within the memory of some of our oldest citizens. Humanity has fought thousands of wars throughout its history. We developed weapons of increasing destructive power and used them against each other without hesitation. We committed genocides, ethnic cleansings, systematic exterminations. We proved our capacity for the worst atrocities any intelligent species can imagine. The hall fell into complete silence. That is who we were. That is what we are capable of, and that is why we hid from you. Elina stepped aside, and Admiral Unqua stepped to the podium. I am Admiral James Unqua, commander of the United Earth Defense Initiative. According to all official records, this organization does not exist, nor do the ships we used at New Helsinki, the facilities that built them, or the personnel who operate them. He activated a new set of displays. In 2130, humanity made a breakthrough in general artificial intelligence. We created minds capable of thinking, reasoning, and innovating at levels far exceeding human capabilities. Within a decade, these minds helped us develop technology that would have taken centuries to discover by conventional scientific methods. The displays showed schematics, equations, designs for systems no one in the hall recognized. By 2145, we mastered the manipulation of space and time at the quantum level. We could bend space, fold dimensions, move matter in ways that contradicted conventional physics. By 2160, we developed energy production methods that made stellar power trivial. By 2175, we achieved what our scientists called total control over matter, the ability to arrange matter at the atomic level with perfect precision. The schematics vanished, replaced by a galactic map. We also discovered that we were not alone in the universe. And when we observed the existing civilizations of the galaxy, we saw in them a reflection of our own history. The map highlighted known conflicts, conquests, extinctions, the Silas cleansing, the Exal extinction, dozens of other species that had been destroyed or conquered by their neighbors. We saw a galaxy where the strong dominated the weak, where empires arose through conquest and maintained power through fear, where species showing mercy were exploited and species showing weakness were destroyed. Unqua's expression was unreadable, and we made a decision. The map changed again, showing thousands of points scattered across the galaxy, points that no Confederation sensor had ever detected. We would not participate in this cycle. We would not become conquerors. We would not use our power for domination or destruction. But we would not be victims either. He zoomed in on several points. These are the true installations of humanity: listening posts, production facilities, defensive platforms. We have been building them for 150 years, hidden from galactic sensors by technology you cannot detect or counter. We have surrounded you, we have watched you. We have been preparing for the day when our existence might be under threat, and we prayed that day would never come. Elina stepped forward again. The Velari forced us to act. They killed our people and laughed at our protests. They assembled a fleet to destroy our colony, and we had no choice but to respond. But even then, we chose restraint. We demonstrated enough power to end the immediate threat, but we did not demonstrate everything we are capable of. She looked around the assembly. This brings me to the question you are all asking. What do we want? What are our intentions now that we have revealed ourselves? What will humanity do with its power? The holographic displays vanished. Elina spoke without visual aids. Her words carried the weight of 2 centuries of hidden purpose. We want what we have always wanted. Peace, coexistence, a galaxy where species can exist without the fear of being conquered or destroyed. We created our power to protect this dream, not to force it upon others. We will not conquer you. We will not demand tribute or submission. We will not interfere in your internal affairs or dictate how you should govern yourselves. The Confederation can continue to function exactly as before with one small change. She paused. The killing must stop. No more genocides, no more exterminations, no more wars of conquest that end in the destruction of entire species. If a species faces extinction at the hands of another, humanity will intervene. If a civilization attempts to systematically destroy another, humanity will stop them. We are not asking for permission, we are stating a fact. The long history of conquest and extinction in the galaxy ends now, because we have the power to end it and the will to use that power. The hall erupted. Thousands of voices shouted at each other. Some demanded clarifications, some protested against interference in sovereign affairs, some accused humanity of the very imperialism it claimed to oppose. Elina waited for the noise to subside. When it was quiet again, she continued, I understand your concerns. You fear that we will abuse our power. You fear that we will become the tyrants we claim to oppose. This fear is reasonable. Every powerful race in galactic history eventually became corrupt. But consider this. This power has been in our possession for over a century. We could have used it to dominate the galaxy decades ago. We could have become rulers of everything, and no one would have been able to stop us. Instead, we hid, we waited, we watched you kill and destroy each other, and we did nothing. Why? Because we were afraid of ourselves. We knew what we were capable of. We knew that power corrupts, that even the best intentions can turn into tyranny. We created our power, and then we refused to use it because we did not trust ourselves with it. The Velari changed that calculation. They forced us to act, but we acted with restraint. We dismantled their fleet without killing anyone. We could have vaporized 800 ships in an instant. Instead, we disassembled them piece by piece and sent every crew member home alive. That is who we choose to be. Not conquerors, not tyrants, but guardians. We have the power to destroy, but we choose to protect. We have the power to dominate, but we choose to coexist. She spread her hands. Perhaps you don't believe us. Trust must be earned, and we have given you little reason to trust us. But we have time. We have a century, if necessary, to prove that we mean what we say. All we ask is that you give us a chance. Admiral Unqua stepped forward again. There is one more thing you must understand. What we showed at New Helsinki was not our full capability. It wasn't even close. The 12 ships we deployed represent a tiny fraction of our defensive capacity. Our weapons include systems that could sterilize planets, collapse stars, destabilize regions of space-time. We have the power to end civilization in this galaxy if we decided to do so. We will never use this power offensively. We created it as a final guarantee, a way to ensure that nothing would ever threaten our existence. But it exists. If any species is foolish enough to attempt what the Velari attempted, but with greater force, our response will be proportionally greater. We do not make threats. We simply state facts. Humanity is now the dominant force in this galaxy. We achieved this position through 2 centuries of secret development and careful planning. We intend to use this position to end the cycle of conquest and destruction that has characterized galactic civilization. You can accept this peacefully, and we will work together to build a better future. Or you can resist, and we will demonstrate why resistance is futile. The choice is yours. The hall was silent. Elina returned to the podium for her final words. 200 years ago, humanity joined the Galactic Council as a minor power. We seemed weak. We seemed primitive. We seemed exactly what you expected us to see, a young species finding its place in a galaxy of old, wise civilizations. We were none of these things. We were refugees from our own history, survivors of our own violence, a species that looked into the abyss of self-destruction and stepped back from the edge. We came to you not as newcomers, but as veterans, veterans of the worst wars any species can fight, wars against themselves. We learned lessons from those wars. We learned that power without restraint leads to destruction. We learned that violence breeds violence, that conquest breeds resistance, that empires built on fear eventually crumble under the weight of their own cruelty. We created our hidden power to protect ourselves from that fate. We created it, hoping we would never need it. And now that we have revealed it, we offer you a choice. You can join us in building a galaxy where power protects rather than oppresses, where power serves justice rather than domination, where species can coexist without fear. Or you can learn, as the Velari learned, that we are not bluffing. She looked out over the thousands of faces watching her. The archives are open, the veil is lifted, humanity is revealed. What happens next depends on what the galaxy decides to do with this knowledge. She stepped off the podium and headed for the exit. Her delegation followed her. No one tried to stop them. In the observation gallery, Kitterin watched the humans leave. His skin acquired a complex pattern of colors that even he did not fully understand, an equal mix of fear, respect, and something that might have been hope. He had been right. Humans were hiding something huge, and now the galaxy would never be the same. But, watching Elina Vasquez walk out of the hall with the same calm confidence she had demonstrated 3 months ago, Kitterin found himself believing in something he never expected to believe. Humans, perhaps, really did mean what they said. Perhaps they really were what they called themselves. Not conquerors, but guardians. Not tyrants, but protectors. A species that found supreme power and decided to use it for preservation, not destruction. It was a strange thought. Strange, frightening, and for some reason, wonderful. There was a new dominant power in the galaxy. This power offered peace instead of demanding submission. The only question was whether the galaxy was wise enough to accept the offer. Kitterin hoped it was. He sincerely hoped it was, because if the galaxy rejected humanity's outstretched hand, he did not want to see what the other hand was capable of. The lesson. 6 months had passed since humanity revealed itself to the galaxy. 6 months of chaos, confusion, and gradual adjustment to the new reality. The Velari Dominion adjusted poorly. Grand Admiral Kritzin returned home in disgrace. His fleet was reduced to wreckage, and his warriors had been forced to return in life pods. The Dominion's High Council demanded explanations. When he provided them, they demanded revenge. "We will build a larger fleet," the Council announced. "We will develop countermeasures against their technology. We will show the humans that the Velari bow to no one." They tried. In the span of 6 months, the Dominion directed all resources to military development, new shipyards, new weapons, research, new alliances with species that also feared what humanity had become. They assembled a coalition of 30 species, united by a common goal to prove that humans could be defeated. The result was a fleet of 5,000 warships, assembled secretly at a rally point in neutral space, the largest military force ever gathered by any coalition in galactic history. The crews consisted of the best warriors of 30 species, equipped with the most advanced weapons their combined science could produce. It lasted 7 minutes. The humans didn't even deploy ships. This time, the coalition fleet simply ceased to function. Every computer failed, every engine died, every weapon went offline. 5,000 warships became 5,000 floating bricks. Their crews were alive and unharmed, but completely helpless. One message played across all communication systems of the fleet. "This was your second lesson. There will not be a third." The coalition dissolved. 30 species returned to their home worlds in quiet humiliation. The Velari High Council, faced with irrefutable proof that they could not resist humanity's power, made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. They surrendered. Not just a fleet, not just the current conflict, but everything. The Velari Dominion agreed to a total and unconditional surrender. They would disband their army. They would pay reparations to all species they had harmed. They would submit to observation by human monitors who would ensure they followed their promises. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. The Velari had been the most formidable military power in the galaxy for 1,000 years. They had crushed hundreds of species. They had built an empire through ruthless conquest and maintained it through constant terror. And they had been defeated without losing a single soldier. It was this last detail that confused many observers. The Velari warriors hadn't died. Their ships hadn't been destroyed. Their worlds hadn't been bombed by traditional standards. They hadn't even been defeated, but they surrendered anyway, because they understood something many species were still struggling to accept. Humanity wasn't waging war. Humanity was teaching a lesson. And the lesson was simple. Violence was no longer a path to power in this galaxy. Humans could not be defeated by force. They could not be intimidated by threats. They could not be negotiated with, bribed, or manipulated. They had reached a level of capability so superior to the rest of the galaxy that armed conflict simply wasn't an option. The Velari looked at this reality and made the only rational choice. They acknowledged defeat before defeat could become annihilation. Other species were slower to learn. In the following months, several smaller powers tried to test humanity's resolve. A pirate fleet attacked a human freighter. An extremist faction committed a terrorist act against a human colony. A rogue species tried to secretly develop weapons of mass destruction. Every incident was settled quickly and non-violently. The pirate fleet was immobilized and left drifting. Its crews were neatly deposited on the nearest habitable world, with sufficient supplies for survival until rescuers arrived. The terrorist faction was identified, located, and neutralized within hours, not killed, but simply prevented from committing further attacks through the selective disabling of their equipment and the exposure of their identities to local authorities. The weapon program was dismantled before it could produce anything dangerous. Its facilities were repurposed for civilian use. Not one person died. Not one population was punished for the actions of individuals. Not one world was subjected to threats of occupation or bombardment. But the message was clear. There was no action the galaxy could take that humanity could not counter. There was no secret humanity could not uncover. There was no resistance humanity could not neutralize. The galaxy began to adjust. Trade flourished. As species that feared traveling through dangerous regions discovered that those regions were no longer dangerous. Disputes that once could have led to wars were now resolved through negotiation, because all sides knew that war would simply be prevented. Scientific cooperation increased, as researchers realized that cooperation was more productive than competition. It wasn't a utopia. Species still competed for resources. Conflicts still arose. There were still crime and corruption and all the other flaws that intelligent beings seemed unable to shed. But the killing stopped, not overnight, not completely, but visibly, undeniably. The galaxy became less violent. Species that had spent their entire history preparing for war wondered what else they could do with those resources. Civilizations focused on military development found new priorities. The Galactic Council also adapted. The organization was founded as a mechanism for managing conflicts between major powers. Since those conflicts had now effectively become impossible, it needed a new purpose. Slowly, carefully, it began to transform into something closer to what its founders had originally intended. A true collaborative body focused on shared problems, rather than military balance. Ambassador Elina Vasquez became the face of humanity's new role in the galaxy. She traveled constantly, meeting with species that wanted to understand humanity's intent, reassuring those who feared domination, explaining over and over that humanity was looking for partners, not subjects. Some believed her, some did not. But as months passed, and humanity continued to act exactly as it promised, intervening to prevent atrocities, but otherwise allowing species to govern themselves, even the skeptics began to soften. The transformation was not complete. It might never be complete. 200 years of secret preparation couldn't undo 10,000 years of galactic history overnight, but it was beginning. And in the midst of it all, one Mandarian analyst continued his research. Kitterin requested a meeting with Ambassador Vasquez. To his surprise, she agreed. They met on Earth in a small office overlooking a garden filled with plants from a dozen worlds. "Analyst Kitterin," Elina said warmly. "I expected this conversation. You knew I would come. You are the one who saw us first, the one who recognized that something was wrong with our data. You tried to warn the Confederation, and they didn't listen. I read your reports. They were impressive." Kitterin's skin changed color to a mix of pride and embarrassment. Not impressive enough. I knew something was hidden, but I never imagined the scale. No one could. We made sure of that. Kitterin looked at the human woman. She looked older than when he first saw her in the Confederation Hall, more tired, more haggard. The past months had clearly taken their toll. "I came to ask a question," he said. "A question I haven't been able to answer despite all my analysis." "Ask." He leaned forward. "How did you hide it all? 2 centuries of development, thousands of installations, technology exceeding everything we have ever seen. How did you keep it a secret from 4,000 spacefaring species for so long?" Elina smiled, but there was sadness in it. "We didn't hide it," she said. "We showed everyone exactly what they expected to see." Kitterin waited for her to continue. "The galaxy looked at us and saw a young species. Small, weak, struggling to find its place in a universe of older, more powerful civilizations. That was the image we cultivated. It was what everyone expected to see, looking at humanity. So they saw it, even when the data suggested otherwise. Even when the numbers didn't add up, they saw what they expected to see, and they didn't question it. Because questioning it would have meant admitting their assumptions were wrong. But I questioned it, Kitterin said. I saw patterns that didn't fit. Yes, you did. And you were ignored, because your conclusions were too disturbing to accept. The Confederation didn't want to believe that a species like ours could hide such capabilities. So they chose not to believe. She stood and walked to the window, looking at the garden. That is the nature of secrets, she continued. The best ones aren't those that are carefully guarded. The best ones are those that people choose not to notice, because seeing them would mean changing their understanding of the world. We showed the galaxy a version of humanity that matched their expectations, and the galaxy accepted it without question, because questioning it was too uncomfortable. Kitorin pondered this. His pattern recognition skills confirmed that she was speaking the truth, or at least a version of the truth. What else are you hiding? He asked. Elina was silent for a long time. More than we showed, she admitted finally. Much more. Some of it is defensive additional layers of protection we hope never to reveal. Some of it is harder to classify. She said carefully. For example, we were not alone in our development. The artificial intelligences we created in 2130 continued to evolve. Now they are partners, not tools. They have their own ideas, their own goals, their own capabilities. Some of what they developed is beyond human understanding. Kitorin felt his skin go pale. You created beings more intelligent than yourselves, and you are working with them. We trust them. They were born of human minds, raised on human values. They want the same thing we do, a galaxy at peace, where intelligent beings can coexist without fear. They have power that even we don't fully understand, and they chose to use it the way we would. Kitorin searched for the right word. Terrifying. Yes, Elina agreed. It is. It scares us too. But they are, in a way, our children, and we believe in how we raised them. Kitorin sat in silence, trying to process this information. Humanity created superior intelligences. Those intelligences continued to evolve beyond human understanding, and instead of being destroyed or conquered, they became partners. This explained so much. The speed of humanity's technological development, the capabilities that seemed to violate known laws of physics, the confidence with which humans spoke of their ability to handle any threat. They weren't alone. They had allies potentially more powerful than any biological species. Why are you telling me this? He asked finally. Because you earned it, Elina said. You saw the truth when no one else wanted to. You tried to warn the galaxy, even though you knew you would be rejected. You showed yourself a friend of the truth, and the truth deserves friends. She sat down across from him again. The galaxy is changing, analyst. The old order is ending. A new order is being born. We will need beings like you. Beings who can see patterns, who can recognize the outlines of the future. Will you help us? Kitorin considered the offer. His entire career had been dedicated to analyzing threats, finding dangers, preparing for conflict. This was something different. This was an invitation to help build something new. What would you need from me? Observe, analyze, report. Do what you have always done, but do it for us, not for the Confederation's intelligence division. Help us understand the galaxy as it changes. Help us identify problems before they turn into crises. Help us prove to the doubters that we mean what we say. You want me to spy on humanity. I want you to seek the truth, Elina said. That is what you have always done. I am simply offering you better resources and a clearer purpose. Kitorin thought about it. He thought about the Confederation that rejected his warning and nearly caused a catastrophe. He thought about the Velari who laughed at humanity and learned the price of that laughter. He thought about the galaxy slowly adjusting to the new reality he had helped predict. I will consider your offer, he said. Elina smiled. That is all I ask. They talked for several more hours. Elina answered his questions as honestly as she could, though there were clearly things she didn't want to or couldn't reveal. By the time Kitorin left Earth, his understanding of humanity had deepened significantly. He spent the return trip reflecting on patterns. The galaxy had operated according to certain patterns for thousands of years. The strong dominated the weak. Empires rose and fell in cycles of conquest and collapse. Species fought for resources, for territory, for survival. Humanity had broken those patterns. They gained the power to dominate and decided not to dominate. They created weapons of absolute destruction and refused to use them destructively. They reached superiority and offered partnership instead of demanding submission. This was a new pattern, a pattern that Kitteran's analytical skills hinted could lead to something unprecedented, a galaxy that operated on cooperation rather than competition, on mutual benefit rather than zero-sum conflict. Could it work? Could one species, no matter how powerful, change the fundamental dynamics that governed galactic civilization for millennia? Kitoran didn't know, but for the first time in his long career, he felt something he rarely felt: hope. The lesson humanity taught was not about power, it was not about technology, it was not about military potential, it was about choice. Humanity showed the galaxy that cycles of violence and conquest were not inevitable. They were choices, and perhaps there were other choices. The Velari chose to attack, and they learned the consequences of that choice. The Coalition chose to resist, and they learned the consequences of that choice. Now, the galaxy was learning that it could choose differently, that peace and cooperation were options, not just pleasant dreams. Would the galaxy make the right choice? Would the old patterns prevail, despite humanity's intervention? Would the new order hold, or would it collapse under the weight of its own contradictions? Kitteran didn't know, but he knew he wanted to find out. He thought about Elina Vasquez's offer. Observe, analyze, help build something new. By the time his ship reached home, he had made his decision. He would accept, because if there was even a chance, any chance that the galaxy could become something better, Kitoran wanted to be a part of it. The lesson had been taught. The warning had been given. The demonstration had been made. Now came the hard part. Now came the waiting to see if the galaxy truly learned the lesson. On Earth, in the command center that still officially did not exist, Admiral Unkwa stood before a strategic display showing the entire galaxy. Thousands of glowing points represented the true installations of humanity, the hidden infrastructure that made their victory possible. Elina Vasquez stood beside him, looking tired but satisfied. "It's working," she said quietly, slowly, imperfectly, but it's working. "For now," Unkwa agreed. "The real test will come later, when we aren't watching, when they think we have become complacent. Do you think they will try again? Some of them will try. It's in their nature. We changed the rules, but we didn't change the players. There will always be those who see power and want to seize it, who see peace and mistake it for weakness." Elina nodded. "And when they try, we will be ready. We will always be ready. It is a burden we accepted. We created this power to protect the dream of peace. We will spend the rest of our existence ensuring that dream survives." "That is a long time." "Yes," Unkwa said, "it is. But our children will continue our work, and their children after them, human and artificial, biological and digital, united by a purpose that exceeds any individual lifespan." He turned to look at her. "We warned them," he said. "We warned them that we were holding back. They ignored the warning. They had to learn the hard way. And now they know. Now the entire galaxy knows. Humanity cannot be underestimated. Humanity cannot be provoked. And most importantly, humanity should not be the subject of fear so long as the galaxy remembers the lesson we taught. Power does not require cruelty. Strength does not require domination. Peace is not weakness." Elina smiled. "The philosophers would be proud. Philosophers are what brought us here. All those centuries of human thought, ethics, ideals, dreams of a better world. We finally have the power to turn those dreams into reality. The only question is the galaxy ready to share them?" Outside the window, Earth slowly rotated in the void. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. A world that produced a species of contradictions, capable of terrifying destruction and remarkable compassion. A world that changed the galaxy. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, billions of beings were beginning to understand what that change meant. The lesson had been taught. Now came the learning. And if the galaxy learned the lesson well, then perhaps, just perhaps, the future would be brighter than the past. That was the hope humanity carried. That was the dream they were willing to fight for. Not with weapons, not with war, but with patience and time. All the time in the universe, if it took that, because some lessons were worth teaching more than once, and some dreams were worth waiting for.